with our panel today, put it into like reality, so that people like it's a real problem. They should be talking.
Yeah, and so throughout the internship, we have discussed how us and our peers can become involved in local and state and national government. But we noticed that in order to increase especially if those voting, there must be broader awareness rather than what we're in the state. And so we are for organizing foster discussion about the topic between young people in the broader community, because I think before the work can really be done to help minimize some of those barriers, there needs to be more conversations about it. And acknowledge it among you as us and our peers become unvoting and want to work.
Excuse me, the folks online are unable to hear, so our sound checks earlier apparently didn't quite work out. So we're gonna try moving this a little closer.
They're online too?
Yes, we have an online audience. And we did test the sound, but maybe my voice carries more. Can you speak again to you?
Okay, so hi again. My name is Rose Software Weekly. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an intern at the Maine.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm a junior at Deering, and I use she, her pronouns, and I've been interning with Rhodas and a few other people this fall.
So we first got this idea to host and talk about the immigration, poverty, and voting in Maine and in general, because we've noticed that it's not as often that it's great to talk about in our state. It's a big issue, and we just wanted to bring it in like fix with our panel today. We're just going to talk about it and bring it into reality. And we need a lot more bias than
Yeah, so I think Rhoda's covered a lot of it, but just to add to that, we really wanted to plan this panel to foster discussion around the different barriers that exist for a lot of people in our community, in the state, and even across the country, to help awareness among, raise awareness among everyone, but especially among youth as us and our peers reach voting age and have more ability to become civically engaged.
so we have a few questions, and
Yeah, so first we wanted to just go over some logistics. So we will be recording the panel portion of the event today, and it will be accessible on our YouTube page later, and we'll be trying to kind of share that around to our community, and especially our youth community, to make sure as many people can access the information we talk about today. We also have youth interns from across the state, so I think we'll be trying to keep with that as much as possible. And then after the panel, if anyone has questions here or on Zoom, we'll have a short Q&A. And so for those on Zoom, if you have any questions, please leave them in the Zoom to have the conversation. And then after there's some food and drink, so please feel free to stay afterwards. And again, if anyone needs to use the bathroom during this time, it's just right around the corner.
all right. So before we get started, can we just go around and say who the name, pronouns, and what organization they're from? So if anyone wants to.
You can go like this. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Cray. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the advocacy supervisor at Pebble Street. And I work alongside Homeless Voices for Justice. We work, Pebble Street does work with housing, food security, shelter, et cetera, et cetera.
Hi, good evening, Lisa Franklin. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a member of, or I'm an advocate with Homeless Voices for Justice. I'm just a person with lived experience in being homeless, and I just try to stay engaged and give back, and I'm still part of it, you know, so I'm here to talk about this.
Thank you. My name is Fayos Ali. I use he, him, his. I am the executive director of Portland Empowered. We are a program that works with immigrant parents for them to understand the way education works in the US so that they can support their kids. We also work with high school students, and then we have a leadership program for immigrants and BIPOCs called Civic and Community Engagement Fellowship. To make a disclaimer, I'm also a city councillor in Portland.
Well, after that introduction.
That's okay, you are my sister.
Hi, my name is Belinda. I am a new Mainer. So it was we know that people are coming here are freshly coming up from different countries, and I work with RWC, which is the Immigrant Welcome Center in Portland, and I am an advocacy coordinator at our center, and I'm just super excited to be here and just to hear people's point of view as to what's happening around us. And thank you guys so much for organizing it, and I'm super excited to be here. And my pronouns are she and her. So thank you.
Thank everyone so much for being here. Yeah, so we first just wanted to begin by asking any of you why you chose to advocate for this issue or be a part of the group you are working with, and yeah, a little bit of your stuff. So Belinda, if you want to start.
I didn't get the question.
Yeah, sorry. So we just want to say, why did you choose to advocate for this, and why did you choose to be a part of the group working to make change on these issues?
I am passionate about standing up for what is right. For me, it's not even about the color of who you are, where you come from. For me, the human race is, for me, it's important. And so being part of a movement that want to make change and make sure that nobody is left behind, that's where my fire comes from. And so being able to work with new men who are coming in the country newly and being able to understand their stories and how we can sort of help them integrate into the system, I've made it my passion to do so. So being part of here, doing that work, make sure that we all understand why they're here. Because I know there's a misconception as into what most people are here and why they're here and how they, there's so many stories around it, but we're here to clarify exactly why some of them are here. And so I'm just, doing my work and being passionate about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So Portland Empowered, we at Portland Empowered, we believe that education is the beginning of everything in our country, whether it is democracy, whether it is shaping the leaders of tomorrow. All of those comes from public education. And so if you have a group of people who are arriving who did not go through our education system, and they have kids in the school system, they need to understand so that they can support their kids, their kids to be to have a successful education career, and also be prepared to be integrated into our into the community that we have. And we also believe that from the parent to the students who are high school to those who have gone to college and are back in the community, there needs to be a system that will prepare them to integrate into the system. So that is why we're doing what we're doing.
I'm very passionate about this topic. I don't think, whether people are born in the US or not, I don't think that students really learn about our voting process at all, really. I mean, I've been in school for a while, but it was never something that I didn't come out of it really understanding very much. I didn't come from a family that was really hardcore into politics, but I still don't know what a caucus is. It's just but I still always felt passionate that we should take advantage of our voice. People are like, oh, my voice might not matter, but they all count together, they all do. And me personally, as someone that, as I told you before, I've been unhoused. There was something, I don't know when it changed. Taylor, forgive me, when you could help me. But there is you don't need a home to vote. Meaning at one time, I don't know, like I said, I'm ignorant in the fact of when that changed. But a lot of people don't know that you do not have to have your own domicile, your own structure in order to put your voice in. So this past voting day, we didn't bring a lot of people, but we got some voices in that might not have, got to have their say. So that's a good feeling. I'm all about as I'm pregnant.
Belinda.
Belinda said, I feel passionate about that. Yeah, so I'm very glad to be here and talk about this in whatever way I can.
Yeah. So it's not in every state can you vote without a permanent address, but in Maine you can, which is awesome. It's great that our voting system in Maine allows that. I've always been pretty excited and passionate about voting as a way to engage community and a way to create change from a sort of grassroots level when you can get people engaged in something and sort of, I know for me, as I was growing up, it was really community that kept me going. And so moving through my life, I've been really excited and grateful to be able to be a part of communities of people who are excited about voting, who are excited about civic engagement, and working with HUJ and working with Travel Street has just been possibly one of the greatest, like just one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because it's such a, you know, people who are experiencing homelessness, who are experiencing food insecurity, who are experiencing a lot of things that folks in our community are experiencing, frequently voting is not the most important thing to them. In fact, oftentimes it's not really that big of a deal to them, because when you're in crisis, voting doesn't feel that important, which makes sense. But it's cool to be able to have conversations with folks and talk about, like, these are your rights when it comes to voting. This, what is on the ballot is really going to impact you in these ways, and sort of being able to take people to vote for the first time. Last year, we got to take someone to vote for the very first time who was living in one of Travel Street's housing first locations, who had just gotten U.S. citizenship the year prior. And so he came to vote, we all went together, and it was really, really a cool experience for him to be housed and able to vote and to participate in the process. It was super exciting, and just like one of those things that probably I'll never forget. And it was awesome. And so I'm just grateful to be able to be a part of those experiences, and to work with HUJ.
Thank you guys for these thoughtful responses. Moving on to our next question, why did you just advocate for this or be a part of this group, working to make change on? Oh, sorry, wrong question.
Could you speak a little bit louder?
Yeah, of course.
You're the person folks are having trouble hearing it.
Okay, talk louder. The next question is, have you faced discrimination in voting because of your immigration status or income level or access to housing? And we start with Betty.
From my experience, or people that we serve are not actually at the stage where they can actually vote or make their voice heard in terms of voting and whoever comes into legislature. But I think in terms of housing, there has been discrimination in the sense that if you're coming in and you have no, income coming in, and obviously as you're going in, the first thing you're required to give it your statement, how much you make on a monthly basis. So that has been a barrier in the sense that these people are not currently working; they're under GA, which is a general assistant, and so it's kind of hard for them to get housing without GA being the person in question to make sure if they agree or not. So that is the barrier that we currently are facing, and also this gives it a time for people to be educated. It's great we are, waiting to get approved as citizens, but also this phase of time is great for them to be, be more informed of how your voice can help shape your future here, in the United States. And so starting this from the bottom ground, I think it's so essential. And what the work that the PIEs do, they help sort of shape that for them. And so being part of this panel today, and also just sharing the barriers that people go through, it's as little as the language barrier is such a big thing. We have housing portal who are all in English, and these people don't speak the word of English. So how do we facilitate for them people to understand in their own home language? What do we need to do to able to make sure that everybody is, included? So that's where the work needs to start. We need to find ways, and what I will say, there are people who are actually working towards, making that easier, but those who are still, in the process of getting there. And I think starting off the language barrier and finding accessibility to be able to express yourself in your home language for things like going to the hospital or applying for a job, or and things like that. Each and every day we have people coming and asking us, can you call us this house? Because they can't speak for themselves. And when we do get the housing, and then the GA situation, because GA takes such a long time to make payment, and so landlords don't have that trust with them, and so that's another barrier factor of its own. So that's what I would say.
What I would say is that not necessarily. I know you personalize the question, and then you also ask general. I haven't faced. I personally have not faced any discrimination for me to vote. I enjoy voting to the extent that I run for office. I think sometimes we purge our democratic system around voting. I think it is beyond that.
Yeah.
I think with all the groups that we all work with, it is important to have conversations like this. And also for you, I'm glad that you guys are organizing this for young people your age. I think what I would suggest you should look into it, that you're not equally represented. You don't have a voice in who gets elected and who doesn't get elected. So maybe for the next year, you should launch a statewide campaign that will reduce the age of voting in Maine on local issues like school board, like city council, like a county commission, because they make decisions that impact your lives every day, that you don't have a say. Even when you speak, sometimes we don't listen to you. That is the plain fact. 100 young people can line up and talk to elected officials. Once in a while, we listen to them once. Most of the time, nobody listens, right? But if you have the power to put people in office or to remove them, they will listen to you. So that is part of all the. I know that you didn't ask me to talk about young people, right? But that is what is missing in this equation. You're talking about immigrants, poverty, and then you should also think about young people and people from the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
So let's figure out how we can make this happen.
For me, thinking about being for discrimination, and voting intersecting, for me, not so much in Portland, but not having the ability to drive and not having transportation for people to vote is, I think, a big issue, especially in most of Maine. Portland, obviously, there's buses, but I think that is something where I have felt, I don't know, I haven't been driving for the past like 8 years, and I know I live in Brunswick, and it's a minimal bus thing. And that Brunswick's even like not a tiny little town. There is something, I'm just thinking for most of the state, that's a big issue that I think stops people from being part of the process. And I think it has a lot to do with income, resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And building on that too, I think voting day is usually on a Tuesday, which is the day that people go to work. And so for a lot of folks who are low income or lower income or sort of living paycheck to paycheck, et cetera, whatever that is, missing that, or if you're working 2 jobs, or if you're working like 18 hours a day, you don't have time to go and vote. And so there's definitely like barriers to voting that I think many of us are privileged enough to not have to consider when we're thinking about that. I know that I personally have had, I don't think I've ever experienced, I actually know I've never experienced discrimination trying to vote, registering to vote, anything like that. And I feel really fortunate that that's the case. And I know that for some of the folks that we've worked with in registering to vote and in getting people to the polls, I mean, definitely not necessarily discrimination for these folks, but definitely pushback. I've taken people to the city clerk's office to try to get them registered to vote, to try to bring those green cards in, and it's always, well, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, it's, these people they don't have permanent address. Okay, we've written homeless in Portland on the card and we've given you a PO box. Okay, but what street corner do they sleep on? No, I'm not going to give you that information because that's none of your business, and so having to have that sort of, it just feels a little bit redundant sometimes to have to go in and say, well, they're on this specific park bench on Thursday night, like I'm not going to write that. And so for some people, I think that's definitely a level of frustration. But I love what you said about young people not being able to vote for even school board or things like that's really.
I think we should welcome.
I think it's a great point.
I will let young people to speak for themselves. They're gonna work on that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, as with what you guys said, I think what we've called this, like, a kind of something on intersections of poverty and immigration voting. I think, in the United States, there's so many minority groups or, marginalized groups who, their voices are quieted or, stopped from being part of, not only voting, but kind of all of our government, all civic engagement. So I think, while we have some incredible panelists who have some like unique engagement in your community's experience, talking about all of that, I think is really important. This draft, thank you so much for having that in. It's really important to not like shrink the amount of people we're talking about. But to move on, we did want to you say you kind of talked a little bit directly about transportation, which is really, I think really interesting, but if there's any direct barriers, or if you want to expand on kind of, Belinda, if you've seen like how that, kind of language barrier, once people maybe even do get citizenship or can vote, if, how that makes it harder to receive education or receive that information, and, yeah, if there's kind of any more, specific barriers, to voting or civic engagement.
Okay. So the people that we serve are currently just arriving into the United States. And so they're not really in a stage where they can actually vote, but they're in a stage of learning sophisticated the language skills, which is the priority for us at the center, and also helping them to integrate in other benefits that are out there to sort of help them equip themselves. Once they're in the stage where they can actually vote, they know what they're doing. And so for us, it's mainly on education and finding a way to integrate them into the system. Coming to the center on its own is a challenge. They don't have cars. And so we make it our daily thing to make sure every day every person is issued a bicycle with a ticket to make sure they're able to come home. So transportation also is a big factor for them. Because a lot of them stay in different areas, but because the English is such an important part of them being here, and so they make that mission to come, and so we make that mission to make sure that the transportation is covered. But not everybody have that, accessibility. That those who are, in poor areas can't really come here. And so how do those people come around? And what can be done to sort of fight off that, area of issue? And in terms of what I just love your fire and how you say things. I feel like what you're saying. And homelessness is not even, it's such a big impact. And I don't think people realize how it impacts all of us as a society. And so I think we need to pay more attention, because some of the people are smart people who just made bad decisions. And so we can't just disregard them as a well, it's their own situation. But I think as a community, we all have responsibilities, and this is the time now. How do we work together to make sure that nobody is left behind, especially when it comes to voting? So this starts here, and by doing this, hopefully we can find a solution, for it.
Can I bounce off that for a minute? Yeah. I just want to say, I think that voting and homelessness tie really closely together, because one thing you said is that, like people are homeless because they make bad decisions, and sometimes that's the case, and sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's just that we, it is so expensive to live, period, full stop, but it's also really expensive to live in the greater Portland area. The cost of living is very high in general, and so for a lot of folks, what has happened is they're sort of cycled into poverty, and you miss a rent payment, and then okay, you're evicted from your apartment. Now you have nowhere to live. Now you have to pay for a storage unit. Now you can't pay for the storage unit. You lose your job. It's like this vicious snowball of impact that happens to a lot of folks. And I think a big part of that that we as the community who's voting can be a part of is just like voting in people and policy that will really impact the way that we make housing policies, that we impact the minimum wage, that we approach our city government. And that's why we have been we being HBJ have been really grateful for people like Pius, people like representatives who are willing to engage with us and pay attention and listen. And I think that voting is a huge part of that. And while it's not like the only thing you can do, for some people, and in some cases, it's the best way to impact the outcome for other people.
Mhm.
So I think that that's a huge thing, isn't it? You know, I've heard people say like, well, you can't change homelessness. But actually, you really can. Like, I promise it can be different than that.
I will add one or two things in terms of the language barrier. Currently, in the state of Maine, there's a threshold that a specific language. So a lot of population of people who live in Portland, Westbrook, South Portland, and Lewiston, and other places who do not speak English. When they go to vote, there are a couple of organizations who have to provide interpreters. The dangers of doing that is that the people who are doing the interpretations have the power to misguide where these person's vote can go to. Unfortunately, within the state of Maine, I don't have the numbers, and I'm also not sure if it's a state or federal law. A specific language, whether it is French, Portuguese, Somali, Arabic, or Spanish, in order for ballot questions to be printed in those languages, it has to reach a certain threshold. A certain percentage of the population needs to reach that specific language, not collectively to say French, Arabic, or this. Arabic have to reach a certain percentage of the population. French needs to reach that threshold before ballots can be printed in those languages. So people go in there. Sometimes the Catholic Charities and MERC, Maine Immigrant Rights Coalition, do send interpreters to go to polling stations where they know that a lot of people will go out and vote, so that they can help them understand the question. What we have done at City of Portland, not all the time, what we do sometimes is that on major issues like ballot initiative, we print the questions in those languages and then put them on a wall so that people will see it before they go in and vote. But that also is something that work can be done. And thanks for League of Women Voters. I know that every year there is a voter guide that has been done, and they got translated into different languages, and that has been helpful with the immigrant community.
Okay, so thank you guys all for that response. Moving on, we were wondering, how do you see this happening? How do you see this happening for you and others in your community? Like the barriers. Okay. Yeah. Very fun there. How do you see the barriers happen to you or others in this community, and how has that prevented them from voting or from getting the access to what they need for all any?
I know you guys kind of touched on it,
Yeah.
but I think I have more avenues or reasons.
Right.
I think last year we did a voting thing with Evan, and we had a privilege to go do it in Westbrook. We talk about voting, how important it is. I think we bumped in a house in Westbrook where a lady wasn't a citizen, but the baby was. And her question was like, do I qualify as a mom? And so I think there is a lack of a gap of information there into what, like in one category, do you qualify to vote? Either you are the parent or you now granted as a lead, so there's a whole misunderstanding, and and that's a gap for information to filter. And I know that Evan is doing a great job at making sure that information is put out in different languages. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of people understanding in what stage are you actually eligible to vote and make your voice heard. And I think that has to be worked on, and especially for new generation of immigrants who are now Americans and have the vote to the right to vote. How much of information is being given to them? How many access are there? How many of them actually, know the legislators, or who do you go to talk to about constitutional questions? I think there is a space there that has to be filled up, and it would be great to see some, movement there.
Belinda, just for some background, could you talk a little bit about what that experience with Evan was?
It was amazing. My first time being a new Maine who has no idea what I was voting about, coming to the United States, it was such an eye-opening thing to understand how it works and at what age you have to be. There's just so many layers of it, but it's important to be informed because your voice, at the end of the day, contributes to what happens around you. And so for me, it was a great experience. I really enjoy it. So see you this year again. Yeah.
Knocking on doors together.
In terms of barriers that have been overcome, or this, is that what you were saying in particular?
Yeah.
I don't know if this would count as a barrier. I know, with HVJ, we, organize before elections, like, what would you call it? Thank you.
I just know what you're talking about.
He's like, am I about four?
They've drilled me before, so.
Well, I think in terms of where we have had them located, like we've had in the parking lot of the Preble Street, it's an area where close to where the shelter, I hate calling it the shelter, but the previous homeless services center, which was on Oxford Street before, there was a lot of things right there. And there was, my point is having the forum in a place where just outside in a parking lot where, you know, people that are unhoused could actually listen to what's going on and hear more about issues and, you know, just to make people feel more part of the community. So I think like, that's what we're really lacking. And I know that's kind of an obvious kind of thought, but I just think, especially since the pandemic, I think we're just further away from community. Granted, we do have there's community online, but I just think that we're meant to be with people in a physical sense. And I think that is important. And seeing people, seeing leaders, even our candidates running and talking, and if you're, you know, someone that's unhoused, that could be a really, you know, it's probably not going to make your day at the time, but it's something that you might remember and it might speak to you. And I know it did to me, you know, so. Sure. I don't know how well I'll do, but I'll try. It's just, for instance, unfortunately, the tragedy that happened in Lewiston, not that long ago, on that have a candidates forum of all the mayoral candidates, and that didn't happen. But what it is we had the mayoral candidates for that one, but just different things that are going up. We had the councilman. Yep, we had some council seats were open. The rest of the mayor already. Just whatever election is going on locally, we try to get the people there. I think have they ever had senators or
I think
in the past?
in the past, we have not within my tenure and your tenure in HBJ, we haven't. But one thing we got to do this year, which I really enjoyed, was so the Homeless Services Center is located in District 5, and we were able to have the two candidates who are running for the District 5 City Council seat come to the Homeless Services Center into the milieu space, and we had our candidate forum there. We had coffee and donuts and this big like panel forum style conversation with the candidates, and that was really really cool. It's really nice to be able to bring folks who are running to represent folks in the shelter into the shelter and say, look, here are your constituents. Talk to them and like talk to us about what's going on, and it was really great. I was really glad we were able to do that. And like Lisa said, sometimes we'll have the forums outside in the parking lot at 55, or you know, if you've ever walked down Portland Street or like walked by like Dyer's Variety, like there's usually people outside milling around, and we're sort of like, hey, come have some pizza, come have some coffee, and talk to us about what is important to you, and talk to these people who are running to represent you. So that's a cool,
And I don't know if any of you are familiar with what Housing First is. There are there's a couple in Portland, and it's just places where typically people that are chronically homeless that might have mental health issues. It's a place for them to stay. It's not a what's the word? Not a nursing home, assisted living. It's not to that extent, but it's kind of like a step. It's like a place where maybe people, I know I was only homeless for a year and I'm still not the same. You know, it was in 2020. I mean, granted, we're all different from all our experiences, but it's something. I'd always worked in like fields of helping people, but I really had no clue of what that experience would be like. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What was I saying before that? The Housing First. Yeah. So we had one of those there. That's what I was considering.
Yeah, and but you're totally right, and I think that, so we try to bring candidates to folks in the community instead of bring the community to because sometimes the candidates forums or the mayoral forums or things that will happen in places like the library or, city hall, things like that. It's a little bit more difficult to take everyone there than it is to just say, why don't you guys just come to us? It's going to be easier, I promise. And usually it's a lot easier, it's a lot more comfortable. So I'm grateful we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
That is what makes civic engagement very important. And the homeless voices, you guys are doing an amazing job. I think you should continue doing it. And you should not wait until it is election. Once in a while, you can invite in the summer, you can invite elected officials to come and have ask them to bring the pizza, and they will bring it. The city will pay for it, and then you can come talk to them. Don't wait until the election. Yeah.
With lack of information that there is about voting in general, and a question of that is how can like our society do better to provide these official information for these people, not even just for like ballots and things, but like hired out regular and making it easier for them. And how like you guys explain for your organization, how can like young people even get how can like hired people get word on how to
I mean, I think if somebody could really get some momentum on like a social media kind of thing, I think it could really do something. I don't really have the answer of what would appeal to people, but I always think about that, like even about homelessness or just talking about like when all of the encampments before the last one was swept. I'm so sorry, you guys. I lost my train of thought. What was I just saying? No.
You are talking about how to share information.
Yes, yes. I just think that if every generation has something that really appeals to them, and I think that's an issue. It's an issue that has been going on since we've had communication. How do we best get our message out? I don't have like an answer to that, but I think the younger, the better. Just talking about it more. I think, there's nowhere in the country that it ever gets that great of a turnout. I guess we just have to just make it more of this like everybody does, we all have a voice, just and more of a everyday thing that people just talk about. I know it used to be impolite to talk about politics, but I don't think that's so much true anymore. I think people maybe do it a little bit too much, but no, I mean, no. This is crazy.
I'm not here as a politician. I'm here as Portland Empowered. Yeah. 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 So, I mean, I will build on what Lisa said. There's a lot of information out there. What is needed is how to bring that information to people. And I believe each of our organizations, including the League of Women Voters, are doing the best that we can. Yeah. We just have to figure out how can we broaden. Yeah. Look at what we're doing now and see what can we do. Can we add? Can we change how we do things so that we can reach more people? Yeah.
I think for me, just to meet the youth where they are. I mean, youth nowadays have their own mindset of doing things and how they interact and how they get information from different sides. I think find that source where they get the information from and use that and make sure information is placed there. Be it if it's on social media, is it on TikTok, is it on whatever, just find a niche where young kids go get the information from and use it for, for the voters' information to be placed there.
I think one thing that really heartens me about a lot of like younger folks who are really engaged in their communities right now is that they're really engaged in their communities. I think that the more we encourage people to be a part of the community, and the more I feel like our culture is very individualistic, and so we don't tend to say, okay, who's my neighbor? Who's next to me? What do they need? And I think the more we do that, the more we pay attention to the ways that our actions impact other people, and that includes how we vote and when we're voting and where we're voting and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think meeting people where we're at and doing that together. And,
Yeah.
because everyone's different skills and knowledge on this topic is an important part of the conversation. I guess we would just ask, if there was someone, who hasn't had your lived experience or generally just doesn't have a lot of, knowledge on the subject, what would you give them as insight into what it is like to live with these barriers to voting or to,
I just think, if you've had anybody in your life or had anything in your own life, or, you know, the person I'm talking about has had something, they need to just compare it to a time when they have had to go without, whatever extent that would mean. I mean, we only know what we know. I mean, we can watch and consume media and listen to stories, but I mean, you say your question again. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Good.
I think
You said that today.
But there is something, can you state the end that you said, what?
yeah, of course, just for someone who maybe hasn't had the same experience you have,
Okay,
what would you give them as insight into what it's like to experience these barriers to voting?
I get, I'm sorry, thank you so much for refreshing my mind. I just take the time that if you have had an experience to where you had to really go without, I think that would be one way to compare it. I don't, it's hard to know different people's lives and what they consider difficult. But I guess whatever for them was hard or difficult, just that would be how I would compare it. And maybe just have compassion. I mean, some people tend to be a lot more compassionate if they are familiar with something or something looks like them and talks like them. But that is something that I think is really starting to change. And that is something that in my lifetime I've changed. That does make me cry. It has changed quite a bit. I don't know if you guys think that, anybody close to my age, but it's good to see.
I'm trying to
You
find
know?
a tissue.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
It's fine.
Yeah, and I think our world, thank you. I think our world, I mean, the global community or netizens or whatever we want to call ourselves, I think that's one thing that has, you know, is a good thing that's come out of it. We get to hear a lot of different experiences. So I guess it's just really letting them absorb, and not everybody's at the place to do that, but all we can hope is like to make that stuff aware or out there so people maybe can want to consume it and relate to it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank
That's like,
I think it's just something it's gonna, Belinda, I'm speaking for myself, but I know that you always have ideas, so maybe you can have a.
Well, it's a if I haven't said it, let me just have a minute to say it now. Thank you so much for coming on and just bringing a different area of, you know, what's happening out there. And a lot of us don't really understand what's happening, you know, in homelessness and how it impacts people in a deeper means. And you coming here, you've really opened up a pipeline to listen, this is what's happening, and people are in need. And community is what we all need at one point or the other. And if we can just build up again, because I know Maine is a predominantly white state, and to be honest, that is changing even every day how people are coming in. And I'm not gonna lie, Mainers are so welcoming, and I will be the first to work for that because I've seen it. And so, what I will say, the same effect or the same work that we put forward to help Mainers, and you know, this is getting me emotional. You know, and you know, so the same help we put across for Mainers coming in, it would be great to see the same work or the same effect duplicated for, you know, people who are currently homeless. You know, I think we all need a helping hand, and so doing this framework here, it just makes you see that somehow we are all connected somehow, and so it has to start with the basic human being nature. We are all humans, and we all need each other. And how do we fix that? How do we, you know, build up a bond of people together where we need to have conversations. We need to make sure that my neighbor, I know who they are, as you mentioned, and who are they? And so this is a step to something bigger than what we're doing right now. And I'm just privileged to be here today. And Yeah, I'm crying here, guys. I cry bad. Yeah, I am just, yeah, live experience before you judge anybody, be in my shoes, before you say anything. Imagine you being a person across the street and you looking at yourself, what would you say, before you say anything, think. People are out there struggling each and every day, and some are just, going through the most. And I think it's mindful of ours to, or it's ignorant of us to start assuming things. And so think before you say something, we are all human at the end of the day. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you for that.
Love you for that.
I think we'll just quickly before we move into the Q&A session, I think, I would just like to ask, is there anything that you would say individuals could do, or speaking for your organization, or just from what you see in the community, yeah, what like an individual could do to help make change on this topic?
Meet other people.
Touch grass.
Sorry.
That was fair. I think meet other people, like people with different backgrounds, people with different experiences. One thing that I think working with HBJ and working at probably and just being a part of so many people's lives in such different small ways. The biggest thing that I have learned in those scenarios is just like when you sit with someone and listen to their story. Actually, there's a quote that someone said to me one time in some, I don't even remember, but it was like, it's hard not to care about someone once you've known their story. Yeah. And I think I wrote it on the whiteboard and I look at it every day. And even when I'm really frustrated and having a really bad day, it's a nice reminder when you know people and you meet people, you learn from people, it's harder to forget about them when you're making decisions.
It's almost like if you see a bad movie, they didn't develop the characters, you don't want to watch it. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. And it's frustrating to me, I will say, like when people do get touched by something that they might normally get touched by, and then they act like then they're all over that, and they just come about it kind of it's almost like the reverse energy. It's like you had that happen to you, that's horrible, but there's lots of issues. I think just trying, and individuals can unfortunately, most people here are not the people that probably need to hear this, or maybe even listening to this. But if maybe as somebody that is thinking about these issues, maybe if you see an example to where it might develop somebody's empathy or compassion, you can point it out as an individual that is mindful of stuff like that.
I will say volunteer. Each of us have a passion for one thing or the other. Find organizations in the community, which we have a lot here in Portland, and across the state, who are doing something along the line of issues that you care about. The only way that you can make change happen is when you get involved. And getting involved comes in different layers. It could be by just volunteering for some organization and via social media, or do what the 2 of you or 3 of you have done, organize forums like this and get people to talk about issues. And on that note, I'm looking for social media volunteers. And the person who is interested. Oh yeah, there you go. Let's talk after. Okay, yeah. Portland Empowered need one, and we get to learn from you, and you get to learn what we do. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to echo what Vice said. Volunteer. I think the only way you're going to get to know what's happening in the community is actually being part of it. And so find a place where you find that your energy, drives towards. It's working with clients or working with voters, women voters. Just be out there and just be mindful, be open-minded to learn, to discover. There's so many things out there to find out about people. You will never know we all have things in common. It's the funniest thing. So just be open-minded to want to learn, what's out there before you make judgment to people. Yeah.
Thank you guys for all those thoughtful answers. If anyone in the audience over Zoom has any questions for them, please share.
Where do you think that being disabled or having a disability can fit into all of this? Like, especially with being new to the US, being homeless, because those two things are so closely knitted together.
Mm-hmm.
The language barrier, say if you're blind or deaf, and the issue of transportation as well. If you're disabled or you live in a rural area, what is your opinions on that?
We need to do more. We're not doing enough. I don't think there is enough help or enough assistance being put across for people who are disabled, who need help. So we need to do more in terms of the community and investigate and go out and see what's the need and make sure everybody is served accordingly. That's how I can say.
I think when conversations like this is being held, most of the time, the group that is vulnerable and marginalized, that we tend to not invite to the table are the disabled communities. About a week ago or so, the superintendent of schools have created a strategic plan for the next 5 years. And he was going around and talking to different communities, and I happened to be in a group that he was talking to. And there were two parents, a couple who have a disabled child who goes to Portland Public Schools, and they are teachers in the system. And they brought this conversation. And honestly speaking, we all held our head and said that there's only 2 lines in the strategic planning that talk about that dealt with the issue of disability, but it is all over the place in our community. And sometimes when we hear the word that someone is disabled, we tend to stereotype and leave it at people who are physically disabled, but disability goes beyond that. And we tend not to talk about that. So thank you for bringing that. And I think, as Belinda said, all of us can do much better by incorporating that into the work that we do.
I will echo Belinda as well. Just there's not enough services, and it's gotten better. I know I talked about like my lifetime. It has gotten better, but that doesn't mean it's good enough. I guess just talking about it more and getting it to be more of the norm. That's everything's normal. We should all. No one is better, or we all need each other. That's what I should say. We all need each other, and we need to figure out those interworkings in a better way.
Yeah. One thing that I am really hopeful for in the future, and that I think a lot of advocates within the shelter and housing sphere are working towards, is better accommodations for folks with disabilities in housing and shelter. Because you see a lot of folks who are experiencing homelessness who also are experiencing some form of a disability, and to be unhoused and have that happening to you, it just like sort of adds to the difficulty that people are experiencing. We see a lot of people who are physically disabled in some capacity, which makes it difficult for them to access the shelter services, and the shelter is not equipped to actually help you. I don't know if anybody saw in the Press Herald this summer, there was an article about the Homeless Services Center, and there was an individual who is blind who was really struggling to be in the Homeless Services Center because there's nothing there to be helpful or accommodating for that individual. And so that person left the shelter and can't access the shelter. And so it's just really, it's like things that maybe aren't being considered when you're around the table having conversations about, how do we create better shelters? You have to invite everyone to that table. And I think that that's something that as advocates in any spirit, it's such a big thing to be considering. And it's just not something that people are having those conversations about. So thank you for bringing that up. And I hope that in whatever spaces you're in, you're also always asking these questions, because it's so important. And
I would say too.
That's okay. Never too much. Because there's always someone that is glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
So,
We have a question off Zoom. A couple of folks had mentioned transportation challenges. For people who have difficulty getting to election locations, we think we should be prioritizing absentee ballots to help them be able to vote.
Yes, I think absentee ballots and early voting. Because I think we have, about 3 weeks of when people can go and vote. 4 weeks. Maybe what we need to do is probably advocate for it to include Saturdays and Sundays. We do Saturdays and Sundays, I think, when it gets very close to the election, but to do it throughout the period that we let people vote early, so that the population that you mentioned earlier who have to go to work will also have the ability and the opportunity to go and vote.
Thank you so much for your time. I would love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on integration versus assimilation, and how especially white folks in Maine can make more space for newcomers. And kind of, again, like representation and places for people to plug in and really uplift other voices. And just ways that you see there could be, more focus on integration versus forced assimilation and separation from culture and community.
So I think there is something that we talk about amongst immigrants, that once you leave wherever it is that you are from, you're never going to be part of that, right? And then you will find yourself in another culture, and you're never going to be part of that either. When you go back home, they're like, oh my goodness, this person is gone. We don't even know who they are anymore, because they've adopted and a foreign culture, and they're bringing it back to them. And then when you are where you are, you also, it doesn't matter what you do, you are still that guy or that person who is not from here. So I think assimilation is needed, but within a certain limit. Integration, I think we should let people be who they are, and then get them to be part of the larger society. The reason why I say assimilation is important is that I speak several languages, right? But the languages that I speak, apart from English, there are not that many people here I speak about 5 languages. And Portland prides itself with our schools speak like 60-something languages. And I speak 5. Nobody, or not that many people. Recently, there are people from Ghana who have been here that we may speak some languages. None of those 5 languages is being spoken by anybody here. Right? Because of the part of Africa that I'm coming from, and because of the part of African population that I'm coming from. So I should be assimilating to the larger community. I need to assimilate so that I can get to participate in everything. But also, people should let me be who I am. I should feel comfortable to eat the food that I eat from back home. I should feel comfortable to wear my traditional clothes and go to wherever, which I do, right? And people learn to, when someone appears in a way that we are not comfortable or we are not familiar with, we can ask questions, or we can just let them be. So that would be my answer to the assimilation and what is the other word?
Integration.
And integration. We can integrate and be who we are, but there are certain things that definitely we have to learn how to do it based on the shared culture that we all have, whether you are traditionally from here or you are an immigrant. Because if you bring someone from the West Coast to Maine, they're going to have culture shock. And similarly, when you send someone from Maine to, even though it's within the same country, yeah.
I think prices will probably say everything I was thinking about. But what I could echo in and say is that I think the culture shock is such a big thing coming to that, to say, knowing that people eat tacos and really like what is in tacos, like what is it, what's inside. And so it's just being out there understanding the country we are living currently now has such a diverse culture of different, especially when it comes to food. And so us being open enough to want to learn, and you guys being being willing to know what we have to offer. Because a lot of people just think, okay, why they just here taking our jobs, whatever the case may be. Just before you senior all this stuff, we actually have plenty of stuff to give in return, and vice versa. And I think both parties have to be open-minded, to be willing to learn from each other. And the American country has also an amazing history, and it will take time for us to be able to get to understand everything, and with something else you guys need to understand. We will get there initially, but while we're in the process, to understand that we're still learning. And I think if you can keep in mind that we should be in a great step.
To add to that, when I first came to the US, it was in September, and then winter came in New York, not in Maine. And I went out to eat with my cousin, and I saw someone drinking iced tea. And I was like, wow, anybody be drinking tea in the winter, iced tea in the winter? And when we left the place, my cousin asked me, he said, "You're from Ghana, right?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Don't we drink hot tea all year round?" He said, what is the temperature there? And so sometimes that is what I look at, the iced tea in winter and then hot tea all year round in a temperature that is like 90 degrees. So yeah, we all have something to do.
That wasn't the example I was expecting. Was good.
Iced tea and hot tea, that's a good one. Yeah.
I feel like this is less of a. I just have one thing to take. I think we don't have enough to say about this in the homeless world, but I do think that this is an area where homeless services, especially in Maine, has a really, really long way to go, because there's a lot of tension in the unhoused community between like who is accessing what services. Yeah, and this is something we talk about a lot in our community, is like everybody needs these services. Like just because you look a certain way does not mean you're more entitled to one service than another person. And so I think it's the kind of thing where there's a lot of, I would say there's a lot of prejudice and a lot of discomfort in like a lot of different communities that are deeply in need of housing, food, healthcare, that feel like something is being taken away from them when new people are coming into the state of Maine and accessing those services. And so it's a constant conversation that we're having. And I think it's an area where homeless services in Maine has a really long way to go in like being more able to even offer culturally appropriate food to people. And like, that's just something that we are still having an incredibly difficult time with, even with the help of folks who know a ton about it. Like, we still can't seem to get it right. And it feels like it shouldn't be that hard. So I think that's an area where there's a long way to go for the homeless services community.
Thank you for all your answers. Were there any other questions?
Thank you, Captain. Yes, we kind of listening the conversation. We could appreciate hearing from each of you and all of you bringing. The first question is about money and politics. This is something we haven't talked about. Here in Portland locally, we have seen elections from the state legislature. We have seen elections. So the message that really comes through around elections and civic engagement in general is driven by national races often, and here in Maine also by races for Congress, for instance. And money dictates in those races who is able to run, what who those people are, what they look like, what they campaign on, what they're going to do, and often those who they are and those platforms are not what our communities need and are not speaking to us, with those feeds disengagement. And so I'm wondering how you think about those issues and how, I see that as a huge bit. And so just wanted to bring it up, something we didn't talk about, because if the people who are running aren't relevant, don't feel relevant to our lives. How do we, how do we convince people to indeed get involved? And how do we change the system for the people who are running, are people like us, who are working for society that's gonna enable all of us to
I feel like I'm a mayoral candidate again. Oh, well, being the only one that have been a candidate here, I think, from different level of government, the issue of money in politics can be different. At the local level, it is easy for city council, school board, county commissioners to walk around and talk to people. And it is easy for people, here you are, when you are looking for someone, I know that you didn't invite me here as a city councillor, but here I am sitting here and you are on a school board. It's going to be difficult to have the congressional person coming to sit here, even if they want to. Because they have way higher. So is our state legislatures. So at a municipal state, it is easy for the populace or the individuals to have control over how elections are funded. At the federal level, I think Maine is big, but we are also a small state. The education that is needed is for grassroots organizers and advocates for removing money out of politics to intensify their outreach and their campaign and their organizing locally to get more people to understand everything that you've said. Because the people who are running, who want to continue the status quo, which means to leave money in politics, they are not going to do that because they don't want it to change. So those of us who want to see that change, it's a lot of work. And I don't think it's going to change overnight because both the people who want to keep the status quo and the money people, the business, the individual with money, also don't want to change it because they benefit from it. So it's a very huge task, but it is possible. We just have to keep working on it. Yeah.
Thank you. And my second question, I didn't really come to both my questions to be for bias.
Oh, no.
Because I saw that yesterday or this week, it was
Right.
reported yesterday, that Newark, New Jersey, just approved the ability for 16-year-olds to vote in school board elections. Yes, and just learning a little bit about that, which I didn't know that there were communities in Vermont, and a few other places in South country that were moving to enable 16-year-olds to vote in municipal elections. So I was wondering what you're going to do to perhaps I don't know. I don't
No,
know.
I will answer it. I'm aware of that. Actually, I know someone that calls me his mentor, who play a role. He's the youngest Muslim to be elected into any office in the US. And I met him through New American Leaders about 5 years ago. He just graduated from Harvard. And I cannot wait to see how far he is going to go in politics. I saw him posted it and he said, yeah, we did it. Hey. And I saw what he wrote and I said, hey, how did you do that? So we're gonna have a conversation. I know that it's something that I think about 5 years ago, I talked to a group of middle schoolers at Moore Middle School. When I went and talked to them and this issue came up, I hope that, and I'm gonna mention anybody's name, some young people in this room right now will look into that and use those of us as those who support them as resources. I think it is better if it comes to the individuals who are going to, I mean, it's not their benefit, it's all our benefit, but it impacts them more than it impacts all of us. They can use us as resources, they can use us as support. But if young people are going to lead, I am here and willing to help them, or to support them, not help them,
I would add to that 3 years ago, our youth council members pursued this and they put a bill in at the state house to lower the voting age for Maine to 16 for all state elections. And because of the drive that those young people had, they pushed the league to develop a position for this. So the league is in favor of this, and we have a whole 50, 75 page research paper if you want to know the pros and the cons, and are fully on board to help young people organize. But like I said, this is an issue that is best led from 16-year-olds, and those areas of the country that have been successful have had young people leading the charge with adult allies and community members who are their voices.
That's awesome. If I can just say that often things that we're not quite able to get done at the state level, we can start in Portland and prove, get it done here and build movement so that we bring that statewide as well.
I wanted to just say and ask you if you knew of this or.
You want to ask me again? Okay.
Yes,
All
one
right.
more time.
Okay.
When I was, this was last election season, and before I went over to the HSC, I was trying to figure, I was like, oh my gosh, there's people there that aren't, gonna be citizens. Can they vote? Because I mean, I obviously know some of the rules of all that, but I didn't know that there were, the city in the past, since 2000, there's been a couple of times that they've actually tried to make that non-citizens should be able to vote. I think the last time was like 2010, maybe, something like that.
In the municipal?
Yes, just in the city itself.
Yeah, in 2000, and I think it was when the the government structure was changed. The issue of allowing every resident who is a green card holder to be able to vote was put on the ballot. It's lost by a small margin, very small margin. And then a couple of years ago, we also on the council, myself and Mayor Chinley brought it forward again. It didn't pass at the council level because there's all sort of interpretation of what the state law says can happen or cannot happen. And then the council literally did not vote. I moved it because it wasn't going to pass anyway. So I moved it to the committee, which it never got up. But it doesn't mean that it may not come back again. Someday it will, right? When you become a city councilor.
I have a general question for any of you. So since COVID and the pandemic and the kind of widespread digitalization of our lives, I personally have seen a massive rise in social isolation. So strangers don't talk to strangers on the subway, or people who don't know each other necessarily that well won't really talk to each other at all. And I think in the in our past elections, especially in 2016 and 2020, the fact that people have not interacted with others, especially others who have different political views than them, has majorly kind of changed how communities view elections. And this is like a very, very broad question. But if any of you have any thoughts on this and how you've seen social isolation play into issues in poverty and homelessness or immigration and assimilation, any thoughts on that?
I personally think it's amazingly absurd how much we cannot get this whole, the fact we could talk to somebody in another part of the world instantaneously. Why can't we make that work to our advantage better? I mean, there seems to be, I know it's our nature as humans kind of to look at the negative at times, but I really wish that that wasn't the case. Because I agree with you. I think the pandemic didn't make it any better at all. I think it just deepened it. And it do, I mean, if you're going online, you are gonna just like in IRL, you're gonna sway toward people that are more think like you. But yeah. I wish it wasn't like that, but I don't know. I don't know the answer.
It's interesting to me. I don't have an answer to this question. I don't have a specific answer. I do have a thought. which is that I see more like person-to-person community support within communities like our community at Public Street, or with the folks that we work with. I feel like I see more community in those groups of people that are oftentimes sort of left out of larger conversations or larger resources or things like that, just because when you need other people so much, you find ways to take care of the people around you. And I mean, that's true in communities outside of the Amherst community, but just like having sort of this, like our day-to-day interactions with one another in like homeless services and in some of the like real grassroots organizing that happens around, even just recently things like encampment states and sort of pushing back against that community. I feel like when you really need help and the people around you really need help, you're more able to make community connection because of sort of life or death. And I think I've seen more of that within, like, not even necessarily directly in H2J, although we all like are taking care of each other, but just like in the greater community than I do outside of that.
Not an answer, a thought, and something for you to also look at. I think having community centers like this will be helpful because more so before the pandemic, US is a country where there's a lot of personal, how do you call it, personal isolation. Some of it intentional, some of it not so intentional. That is why people have homes that have walls. If there are 3 homes on the same block, why can't they just have to tear down those walls? Because your neighbor is neighbor, but in the morning, one person will stand here and then talk to the other person still with that wall. Walls create more isolation, they divide us. And then the pandemic worsened it. There's a lot of change happening in this country, and change is difficult. And that change have moved people into, 1, identity politics, 2, tribalistic politics, and our society is becoming more tribal every day. The few places that you see people from different backgrounds coming together are faith institutions like churches, mosques, synagogue, and anywhere, or places like gyms, or places where people go for yoga. Another institution that can do well by bringing people together is our schools, because schools have kids from different backgrounds, whether it is private or public. We have kids and communities from background coming together because they have their kids in the school. And so if schools call for people to show up and put in effort to engage parents, it brings in people together. But we are at a very critical, the pandemic made it worse because we're forced to go into even more isolation because during the pandemic, you don't even want to get closer to someone because you don't know. They may sneeze or cough and they may impact you, right? So it made it even worse, both psychologically, emotionally, and everything, because we move in deeper into our own space. So that would just be I don't know if it's an answer or a feedback for you to look and see. Maybe you should advocate for more spaces like this across the city, some for young people, some for, it doesn't matter which group, that is more inclusive that anybody can go to.
Were there any other questions on the Zoom?
There was a suggestion a while back, the conversation has moved on, but Gianna had asked if anyone knows of organizations that would consider doing lost wages vouchers or dinner vouchers for people who have to give up time and so forth. And I don't know if anyone on the panel wants to pick that up, or if we just want to, like, that is one thing that somebody I had just said, I don't know if we'll have time to get this. And she had said, it's okay, the conversation has moved on.
I don't know anyone that would do that, but I can make suggestions. Yeah. There's a league somewhere.
Voters
Now have voters in their name. Maybe we can make that suggestion.
I'll admit that this is a question that if I run a panel, I would expect to be coming to me. So,
So you answer it, what do you think?
I don't have, there isn't anyone I know doing that in a big organized way, certainly. And if you bring this kind of thing up around time for voting, the usual response is we have a lot of early voting and nobody's absentee to try to make it so that you don't have to vote on election day.
Mhm.
But I still think that if people specifically want to vote on election day and cannot, I think there's still room to have that conversation and try to figure out what that would. So it's maybe not the most satisfying of answers, but you're right, we are a league, voting isn't a name.
I will say one thing about voting that is a little bit unique for Maine compared to the rest of the country. You can be a felon and vote in Maine, and you can also be incarcerated and vote in Maine. So, yeah,
East Maine, Vermont,
West Virginia.
That's it.
and then, or it may be DC or something, three
I think
places.
it's
Yeah.
Virginia.
Virginia, right? Yeah.
I'm just curious. Is this okay for me to do it now?
There are lots of states that you can vote after you serve time if you're incarcerated, if they're convicted and incarcerated. But I think it's just Maine and Vermont that never just enfranchise people
Right.
For convictions. Although I can't remember, maybe they're not a state, so they're not in my head as a state.
I just remember it was something, I just remember it being not in the East Coast and me going, like,
And,
I'm surprised.
So the person who asked the question about the voucher, I know on election day, Metro does give free rides. But what I said on Metro, but what we've never considered was actually, can we make it free for anybody who within that month, when we have early voting, can we make it free for anybody that want to go vote? That I can promise to look into. Yeah, not the full part.
Any last questions?
Is it difficult to encourage leadership from within the immigrant or the unhoused community? Or is it a vacuum, or is there a groundswell of support or enthusiasm to step into leadership roles?
Can you?
Within either the unhoused community or the immigrant community, is there a groundswell of enthusiasm to take on leadership roles and become part of the greater conversation in municipal politics?
I don't think honestly in the unhoused community, there is a big surge of that just because people are simply like dealing with like the lowest level. But I think certainly like some people after when they're housed.
Yeah.
I do
Is there a
think,
way to recover? Do you think?
I think, yeah, I just think getting people to feel safe with who they're dealing with, I think is one way. I mean, I'm not trying to say that in any type of like, obviously, but I think that would be a big one. Meeting them where they're at. I think that's something that I mean, I've heard that before. That's something that's staying in my head a lot because it's really true. I grew up on a military base around my dad was in the Air Force and just always being around new people. I know it's something that it's in my head just because that's how I survived and grew up, but some people don't come up like that. And, I think it's important for people to adopt and adapt.
I would say in the immigrant community, there's a lot of people interested in leadership, and there are a lot of people who are holding leadership positions, and we continue to educate people to get them involved, whether it is through my organization, Portland Empowered, the Immigrant Welcoming Center. There's an organization here that does a lot of that. So there's a lot of the challenge is the system ready to work with these individuals, and that brings in the assimilation and is our system ready and have what it takes to accept people for who they are? When we have meetings at Portland Empowered, I throw out every rules around meetings, right? And then we still get things done. People will be sitting down and talking about, can we talk to the school district and get them to do this? And at the beginning of the meeting, somebody will bring some conversation that have nothing to do with what we're talking about, right? Instead of saying to them that, that is not what we're talking about, I will participate and find a way to derail it. so that I bring the person back to the topic. I joke to people that our meeting is, she's been in some of our trainings and this, and our meeting is like a big, dysfunctioning Shabbat dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. Because if you're talking about one thing and somebody will start something that will bring another debate that has nothing to do with the conversation that is being taken, and then you have to, and you cannot bring that to the mainstream, how do we call it, the meeting, because everything is, there's an agenda that you have to follow, and then if you're going off the agenda, somebody will say, I think we're going off the agenda, and then if you do that once, twice to someone, they're not going to talk again, because they will think that, is this part of the agenda or just me being me? Right, so all of that, I'm not saying that we should throw away rules, but rules are made to be amended. Yeah.
I mean, I want to add say that, are they ready to get people who look like me part of those offices, those meetings and people are sitting and speaking? Are they ready to hear me put my voice out and my concern, what concerns my people? The question should be, are they ready? Because I feel like we have people who are within the community who have the capability to represent and be part of it, but is there an open space? Is there an opportunity for that to happen?
And I would just say within the unhoused community as well, I think, on a similar note, like, are we ready to change? Like, are our systems ready to change? Because there are a lot of folks, there are a lot of really strong leaders who have come out of homelessness or in a house or sheltered in some capacity who are really excited and participating and really excited about certain ideas, but oftentimes our political system and like the bureaucracy around it is so slow that people get sped up and they don't see the change they're looking for, and they don't see, and it takes a lot to continuously be beaten back like that and keep coming back to, maybe that's too violent of language, but to be pushed away from the goal that you're looking for and to continue to return to it. And sometimes I think that, it really takes a lot of good community support to have that happen. And I definitely think, I know that one thing that really rocks about UCJ is you get to meet a lot of people who are really passionate, really excited, and really want to talk about like their thing, and that's great that we like get to listen and have those conversations. But I think it's also a question of, if you show up to, a public meeting or city council, and there are a lot of city councilors that I really, really respect and appreciate. But there are also sometimes situations where like we'll bring folks in and they're just sort of like, don't feel comfortable with the environment. It just doesn't feel. I've had people say to me, well, can I swear? Like, if I just am really angry and I don't want to have to police my language in this environment, or I don't have a change of clothes, I don't have, and it's sort of like we create environments for the people, and air quoting, that are not representative of all people, and that just feels gross to walk into.
Exclusive.
Yeah, and it's, I think it changes with time, and as more people get into positions where, you can change the way that meetings operate, you can change the way that people show up. But while that's happening, it's still, it's not always the most comfortable environment.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good place to leave the conversation. And if anyone wants to continue talking about any of these issues or anything that's been talked about today, we definitely encourage you to grab food and stay for as long as you want. And me and Rhoda speak for both of us. Just want to say a final thank you so much for everyone being here, and thank you so much for all the panelists for giving.